the thing is, though, an appraiser who's been doing it for 2 days isn't going to be a good expert. Really, it's not going to be a good expert. Normally, we find 4 days is what you're looking for. What 4 you find, but you do it if it's... So you see what you see. So it's really a balance. You know, you really like people that have a fair amount of relevant experience. Relevant, you know, like I said, I do a lot of tidelands work. I do a lot of coastal work down in South Jersey. And we have people that are doing tidelands work. You know, anybody from South Jersey? Anybody from Cape May County, Middleton? So there's this whole thing on tidelands, whole interesting issue, but tidelands are tidally flowed waters that the government owns, and when you have a dock or a pier or whatever, you have to get a property right from the government if you don't already have it. And you need appraisers to establish the value of that. And there's a vibrant practice in South Jersey that just specializes in this area. If you're in North Jersey and you know you've never done any of that work, you're not going to be a good expert in a tidelands case because they get litigated. You know why they get litigated? Tidelands cases get litigated all the time. You know why? They cost a lot of money, those tidelands things. There are a lot. Title rights from the government cost a fortune because they're predicated on the adjacent upland value. So that's some of the most valuable property in New Jersey is our coastal property. So, you know, people are paying, you know, thousands, if not tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in some extreme situations for title rights, you know, for title rights. It's the tidally flowed waters, and people with docks and piers, all these people with the summer homes, they can afford it anyway, you know. But anyway, this is where this applies. So that's where it would work. Next case is Pan Am World Airways. So you know that's an old case. Versus the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, 1993. This was a lawyer's bad day. A witness to testify regarding maintenance of runways didn't qualify because the witness never completed a local air traffic control training program. He had little experience with large airports, and he didn't know JFK Airport, you know. So this was a person who might have had... This was a lawyer who was an idiot. That's what this was, okay? That's what this was. I mean, like, why'd you... I'm going to tell you something. With appraisers, it's not usually the case because there are a fair number of really good appraisers in different areas that you can contact. You should all consider doing this, by the way, as expert work. It's nice extra. But it's usually we can find. But in a lot of what we do in other areas, it's hard to get experts. You know, there are some areas out there where there just aren't a lot of people that really have the experience and who can testify. And so in those instances, you do the best you can. You know, you get somebody with the most relevant kind of experience that you can. Sometimes your good enough isn't good enough. And then that person gets thrown out. And in this case, that's what happened over there. Let's go to the issue of reliability, Rule 702, and I know you guys know this by heart, but let's just talk about it anyway. Reliability, pursuant to Rule 702, testimony should be based on sufficient facts or data. A testimony is a product of reliable principles and methods, and a witness has applied the principles and methods to the facts. That's what we talked about. Go to the next one over here. This is an interesting issue over here, and its applicability to appraisers isn't clear, but it's not clear that there is no applicability. So let's talk about it. If nothing else, it's a good story. The case, the status of experts at the federal level and at the state level, but we use different words for it. It's all kind of the same. Really changed in 1993 with a very famous decision called the Daubert decision, Daubert versus Merrill Dow Pharmacy Incorporated. But this was a case that concerned an area that lawyers call junk science. Everybody ever hear the term junk science? So junk science is something you don't hear too much about with valuations because how you value property is fairly clear. You basically know the standards and the criteria. But you find a lot of it where in toxic tort litigation where there's an allegation that somebody was exposed to something and it made him sick. We're just starting to learn this stuff now. You know, 40 years ago, nobody knew that asbestos could make you sick. You know, well, some people knew, but the right people didn't know. 25 years ago, if you remember, The cigarette industry still maintained that cigarettes didn't make you sick. Many of you might remember that spokespeople actually went on shows like, Merv Griffin and Johnny Carson and all those shows and said there's no evidence that it's bad for you. You might remember, I remember those things. And there was there was a movie called Thank You for Smoking,
Yeah. Yep.
which talked about one of those guys. I remember those guys. And so the state of the science in a lot of those areas is very much emerging and not keeping breast with the illness. So we have lots of sick people, but we don't have science that's necessarily keeping pace with the illnesses. So, and with asbestos, about 30 years ago, they figured out that the asbestos particles get into the fibers of your lungs and start tearing it apart, and that's what kills you and gives you asbestosis and lung cancer. But the science has to get there before people understand that. The first cases in those areas are always the most difficult because there's really not a lot of scientific evidence. It's just emerging. And they've developed a body of case law, and Daubert was one of them. When is the scientific testimony enough that we're going to let it to go to a jury? And the Daubert decision basically says that the testimony has to be inherently reliable and relevant. And they will do what's called a Daubert hearing, where they will just have the expert alone examined and cross-examined by both sides to determine whether it meets this threshold, and that's the Daubert test. Now, the question is this: in some of the emerging areas that appraisers can find themselves in, as we learn more about contaminated property, as we learn more about the impacts of things that remain on property after they're deemed clean, this area is going to grow. And appraisers are going to find themselves increasingly in areas that are not as clear, with science that is not as clear, and with a factual predicate that isn't as established as, some of the more traditional things that you do during tax appeals. There are going to be occasions where appraisers are going to have to look to other areas and in order to make opinions. And of course, you are obligated to note that in your report. You're obligated to note that there might be a diversion from what's accepted, but you could still take a shot at giving an opinion as long as it's a good faith effort and you explain what you're doing and explain where you deviated. There will be questions as to the reliability of those reports. And there will be challenges that are basically Daubert challenges in those cases. There will be hearings with appraisers that will say, is this the type of stuff that, even though it's novel, even though it's not the type of stuff we see all the time, is this the type of stuff that we think is inherently reliable enough that a jury ought to be able to handle it? The rules as to experts and these threshold issues, like the Daubert case, is another one called the Fry case. And that's a competing case. Some jurisdictions are Fry. I know you guys know this already, but some jurisdictions are Fry jurisdictions, some jurisdictions are Daubert. And it's just different cases that talk about when expert testimony can come in, and it's kind of the same with some slight distinctions that we don't have to talk about. But that kind of stuff, the linchpin that underlies all of it is the same, no matter how fancy it is. The underlying concept is the same. Is it reliable? Is it reliable? We don't want juries or fact finders hearing testimony that isn't reliable. And that's going to be, I think, with increased frequency, where we have appraisers looking at property that's contaminated in areas that we really didn't understand before, and the science is starting to teach us more about what the effects are, what the stigma might therefore be, what it's like when you have a house that has radon that's below the legal level but halfway, with toxicologists still saying there's an enhanced risk of getting cancer, and a duty to disclose that may therefore be associated with it when someone tries to sell, depending on the case law in that area. That's all new. That's all new. What's it like when you have a piece of property in an area where there's arsenic, but it's been blended so it's below the residential cleanup standards? Blended means you take dirty dirt and clean dirt and you mix it, you dilute it. But you still have it, and we know where there's a youthful community and we're going to have children, and there's a schoolyard next door. And did you know kids eat dirt? Kids, mine didn't, by the way. I don't know, maybe they're superior. But they say kids eat dirt. kids eat dirt. This is what they say, kids eat dirt. I've been told I should go eat dirt, but I don't remember. And that was on a nice day, you know what I'm saying? I could tell. Yeah, it might have been a different, maybe my hearing isn't so good. But you know, they always talk about this hypothetical kid that eats dirt, and my friends tell me their kids ate dirt too. Feed them more or something, maybe they won't do it. But there's going to be, these issues are going to start to find their way in your profession. That's a promise, I can tell you that. How are we doing over here?
We got 50 minutes.
We have 50 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, well, okay, let's keep going.
I think so, 40 minutes, 40 minutes. 40 minutes.
40, we have 40 minutes. Anybody have any questions, by the way? Come on, I want a good question. Didn't you come with questions? You're like, I need a question. Did Chuck tell you, did Chuck warn you that if you asked a question, I...
Do you have a handout? I didn't receive one, or...
No, I don't have a handout, but here's the deal. If anybody wants our, the PowerPoints,
Yeah.
so you give me your card, and...
We're going to make it easier. If you can give it to me, we'll put it up on our website. You'll be able to, they'll all be able to download it.
I
And
would-
people who didn't even appear.
I will give it to you.
Yeah, we can probably, get this by 5.
We could do that, dear? Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
want to
that's...
skip to,
Yeah.
That's the best line of the day.
What'd you say, what? No problem at all here. You know what, actually, it's good for me too, because I'm thinking about Middletown.
net opinions?
Yeah, let's talk about net opinions. You want to talk about net opinions? Okay. Net opinions. Okay, when I was growing up, my mother used to wear a hairnet. And a net opinion is when an expert's wearing a hairnet. No, and here's what a net did anybody ever hear of the expression net opinion? Anybody know what that is? So here's what a net opinion is. It's a New Jersey specific term, so it only applies really here in New Jersey, but the concept applies in all 50 states. They just call it something else. If an expert gives an opinion that isn't adequately grounded in facts that can be verified and principles that are accepted in the profession, it's called a net opinion. So the opinion, in order to be acceptable, admissible, has to be grounded in facts that are verifiable, and it has to be based on principles that are accepted in the profession. Whatever it is, statutes, regulations, standards promulgated by the profession, but it's got to be something like that. If one of those is missing, it's a net opinion. And what that means is you can't use it. And the opinion's going to be thrown out, and it won't be used, the jury won't get to see it. And the client's going to lose the case, because the client is hiring an expert because the expert's needed to prove the case. So that's a really bad thing. Yes? Judge. The judge. Well, that's a real bad day.
Usually,
No.
yeah.
That's called, we call it a train wreck when that happens.
Usually your adversary will try to file a motion to try to get your expert testimony either suppressed or excluded or something like that. And then it's like it's not really a trial, but the judge will look at the report.
They file a motion.
Yeah, file a
So
motion.
they call it a motion where they argue it. They call it a motion. And the judge will make the decision. So that's what happens. So that happens a lot. There were a lot of net opinions. A lot in New Jersey of expert opinions are thrown out because of that. Yes?
Does it necessarily throw out the entire opinion or portions of
It
the
could be
opinion?
either one.
Okay.
It could be either one. They can surgically remove the net part of it and keep in the arrest, or they throw it all out, or, the court has complete discretion, and it's almost unappealable. I mean, there's not a lot you could do with it. Sometimes you could appeal, but judge has a lot of discretion about what goes in and stays out, a lot. Just about unreviewable. So it's almost unreviewable. Whatever the judge does at the trial level is kind of going to be what's going to happen, and you're going to be stuck with it, so you got to get it right. If you get it wrong, you're going to lose the case. Your client's gonna be unhappy, and you better make sure your fee was paid. Yes?
I think for those who have not done expert testimony, they gotta realize you can't walk in and say, my years of experience, and.
That's
put
a
all
net.
Yeah. and
That's
put
probably
all-
gonna be a net, yeah.
Right, and they put all their faith on that, and then there's no backup to what they did except that statement.
I mean, if I had somebody who said it was based on my years of experience, I would cross-examine the heck out of them. I would be really nasty, especially if I was in a bad mood. So, no, so I mean, that's what it is. So if you came in and said it was a net opinion, and you said that it was based on your years of experience, and that was kind of your strongest, somebody comes in and gives an opinion, it's not gonna happen, because you're gonna all rely on the regular standard. You're gonna give an appraisal, hopefully that you could support using your standards. You're not gonna do that. But if somebody were to come in and their strongest argument was years of experience, that's not going to be a good argument. That's not going to be a good opinion, and it's going to get killed in cross-examination. Judge probably won't let it in anyway. Yeah, yes, sir.